I mean, come on.
He hung a Biden sign in the reddest part of the state. Started pouring progressive beer on nothing but pure faith.
I'm gonna get.
He said they're gonna hate me, might as well be loud. Pass the house and pass the mic, let's disappoint the crowd. With a cooler full of courage and a marketing plan that's mostly just a middle finger in a frosty can. Free beer all day long. Come on down and raise a glass and sing this freedom song. Resistance Pilsner in your hands. The Tammy Shandy too. Just walk on in and raise your glass and sing this whole night through. They boycotted his distributors from Illinois to the north. Kirk just kept on pouring and he doubled down his work. Fox News came a call and thought they shame him.
That happened.
He thanked them for the free press and said, go straight to hell. He said ratings need a villain, guess I fit the bill. Y'all keep yelling.
It's a little long. It wouldn't make radio. It's more than 3 minutes long.
Sold out every case before they cut to we'll be right back choir. Free beer all day long. Come on down and raise a glass and sing this freedom song.
Oh, you need a next.
In your hand.
Thank you, Tony. We need a table for people.
Walk on in and raise your glass and sing this whole night through.
Oh, look at this. It's August. People are coming. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. How you doing? You've made it to the Minocqua Brewing Company in August. Hold on. We got to go live. Oh, yeah. We've already gone live. It's August, which means it is the busiest 2 weeks of the entire summer because on August 15th, all the little kiddies got to go back to start practicing their sports. And this is a family town. You'd think as a family town, they'd be a lot more empathetic, but the tourists are, and the actual folks who live here are less than, and they don't like us very much in the rest of the town. We have a sign that says Minocqua Brewing Company, the least popular place in town. Well, it's funny because there's about 8,000 people that live here year-round and about 80,000 people that come visit in the summertime. And in the summertime, we get a lot of those 80,000 people, but in the wintertime, those 8,000 people aren't showing up. So we are the least popular place in town, but in a tourist town, that doesn't matter so much. And that's why we've stayed alive for the last 5 years, because we can no longer cater to the tourists because we are the biggest blue island in a very bright red area of northern Wisconsin. So I always do that every time I'm in town and I'm able to come up. I live up here on the weekends, as most of you do that own a second home. I'm the same person. I live down in Madison during the week. And if I can be up here, I always try to do a beer tasting for everybody who comes because I love this place. If you haven't noticed, this is about as basically my brain has vomited this to people, and I call myself Bernie Taupin, who writes lyrics to songs, and my graphic designer is my Elton John, who makes it all happen. So this is all my thoughts in my brain and what's happened to the brewing company, then the stories, and then my artist kind of recreates it and we make it happen. So I'm glad you're all here. So what we do today is really fun because it's 4:00. The reason I do beer tasting is 4:00 is that generally, if you're on a boat, you're kind of getting tired to be on a boat at like 3. And then you go home and shower and you think about what you're going to do, what you're going to eat for dinner. And right around 4 o'clock, you're ready to have a cocktail, and then you kind of glide right into dinner. And so I like having these beer tastings at 4 o'clock. You get free beer and you get to hear some stories and my thoughts on some current political issues, which is the only reason this place exists. Somehow I have managed to create a company where it's a political activist company that's funded through beer sales and T-shirt sales. So it's not the other way around. We don't strive to be, well, I hope to make money at this someday. But I'll tell you, the best way to being a millionaire owning a brewery is to start off as 100 millionaire, because you always lose money when you go into this business. There's no doubt about it. Okay, so we want to start. By the way, give a round of applause to Tony today. She's going to be pouring all your drinks and beers. Oh, we've got a special guest who, by the way, is Fred. He's my lawyer. We're gonna have Fred. So this beer I'm drinking right now is called Grateful Fred Red Ale. And Fred, I'll tell what. No, it's not on there. He just showed up, and it's not. We can't buy it by the can. So we can't. This is a great story. This goes. Pour the orange. It's the chaos. You can pour the. We get everybody drinking right away. You can pour the orange drink. Okay, I'll weave it in. So, you've got that already. So the reason you're drinking orange drink right now, which has got THC in it, it's about 5 milligrams. It's legal until November because the Farm Bill allowed hemp-derived THC to be produced all around America. And the big, beautiful bill that Trump passed got rid of that provision in the Farm Bill. So we can no longer sell this in November, but I guarantee you there's got to be a billionaire in the hemp industry that's going to shake Donald Trump's hand between now and November, and this will be back. But until that happens, you might not be able to taste this from us very, very much more. But speaking of legal craziness and chaos, Fred has been the manager of our chaotic company, or the manager of the chaotic lawsuits that have come throughout. I'm probably in the most litigious brewery in the entire country. We sue and are sued all the time. And Fred manages that. And unfortunately, I'm not rich enough. Neither of Fred nor I are rich enough to get rich off of lawsuits. I can't pay him a lot. He has to lower his hourly rate just to allow me to stay in business. And he's one of my best friends. And he'll talk later about what's going on with our actual problems right now. But the story about Fred is I had all these high-priced lawyers. Fred was my friend, but I was like, I got to hire the best of the best in like Milwaukee and Madison in order to get through some of this stuff. They were trying to shut me down, and I was like, all the best of the best thought they were silver-tongued brainiacs. And they're like, don't worry, we can just smooth it over by calling these guys. Well, Fred has lived up here most of his life, and he knows that the politicians in northern Wisconsin have like thicker heads than turtles. So you can't talk to them and convince them of anything. You just have to sue the bejesus out of them and make them fear for their livelihoods. And he was the only one with enough guts to do it. And that's why we've made a beer called Grateful Fred Red Ale. So cheers to Fred. Okay, so Fred, you're gonna come around. Your talk is gonna come around the Freedom Trail Kolsch. So, you're talking about everything, Fred. Beer confiscation. You're talking about Graham versus Healed. This is gonna be a legally rich, drunken hour, I feel. But let's keep going. So, have you gotten the wine yet? Okay. So, by the way, the reason I poured the THC first is that, pour the wine, please, Tony, is that the entire issue with the Minocqua Brewing Company this year. There's a new issue every year, by the way. But the entire issue that happened this year started in probably February, when I think I may have had one too many of these. And I was mad at something that Trump had done. And I wrote on Threads. And I said, okay, free beer the day that he dies. At both Minocqua and the Madison Tap Room. I promise you we will not renege on that promise. I went to bed that night and I woke up the next morning and it had gone viral on Threads. But I was getting calls from Fox News, from the Daily Mail in London, which is like the National Enquirer, but it's owned by a fascist in the UK. I got calls from the Blaze. It was absolutely ridiculous. And I kept on doubling down. I'm like, there's no way that the world won't be happy when he dies. I don't know why you're calling me and saying that I've said something wrong. We usually celebrate the death of evil men. You know, I think we've done that. I think when we won in World War II and Hitler committed suicide, I think there was dancing in the streets. So arguably, I think what I said in February is not terrible, but the Republicans definitely want to make it seem that way. So now we go to our wine, specifically because I want to get your palates not messed with, and I want to have wine first. But it fits the story because we make a wine called Choice. We give money to reproductive rights groups with every bottle of wine that we sell. This bottle is made by Equality Vines in Sonoma, California. One of the co-owners of Equality Vines is a guy named Jim Obergefell, who gave us the Supreme Court case of Obergefell v. Hodges, which gave us marriage equality. It happened in 2015. Jim Obergefell is a gay man. He was in Ohio. He wasn't able to visit his partner when his partner was dying in the hospital. And I dare say you have to have a heart made of absolute coal to think that somebody who loves somebody else shouldn't be allowed to be with them at the end of their lives. So these guys are wildly famous in Sonoma because Guerneville, California is like Minocqua. Guerneville, California is to San Francisco as Minocqua is to Milwaukee, Madison, or Chicago. And there's a lot of LGBTQ plus folks in San Francisco, and so they love Equality Vines up in Guerneville. But the point of this is that we make wine with them every year, and we sell it here in our tap rooms. And this is a Sauvignon Blanc. And so I was proposing to my girlfriend Tracy at the top of a mountain, a pine mountain in Sonoma, where this wine was made. And she said yes, and I was very happy. Come on in, ladies and gentlemen, if you want. We have chairs here. Huh? You can do whatever you want. Yeah. No, yeah, fine. It's good. But so I was proposing to my girlfriend, and we may have had a few bottles of wine. And the same night later, we heard on the radio that there was an assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. So, of course, because I've been selling a lot of T-shirts that say "Free Beer Day" when he dies, and there's an assassination attempt, I feel like I'm compelled to write something on Facebook. So I wrote, either a brother or sister in the resistance needs to work on their marksmanship, or Donald Trump faked another assassination attempt to get over a bad news cycle. I kind of meant to focus on the second part of that phrase as the joke, and I might have been 2 bottles of wine in, but the first part of the phrase was once again captured by national media. By the national media that we all love, that we all hate because they're not real, and that would be Fox News, The Blaze, Newsmax, the Daily Mail, once again, this crazy British tabloid. And they all were like, how dare you, say that. Yes. This happens before, too. I always say the FBI is trying to channel into my Spotify so I don't talk. But, so So now I get in another big, wild national controversy because now I'm calling for the death of a president. And now, Tony, you can pour the Mexican lager. So, because this is the next story that happens and it kind of fits. So, by the way, this is the Mexican lager. It is and will always be the Gulf of Mexico to me.
Woo! Woo!
Let me read you the back of the can. But remember, this through line will not go away. I'm like Richard Pryor. I can go off in like 5 different directions, but I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back. I promise you I'll bring it back. So here's the back of the can. It says, on January 20th, 2025, America's twice impeached convicted felon signed an executive order that changed the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Yes. By the way, I don't think that is one of those. I think it's just a bad muffler. But there's extra entertainment when one of those comes by and blows coal smoke up in the air. We call that the Monaco Brewing Company Bird Watching Society. Anyways, here we go. Yes, by forgetting to reserve his only family brain cell that day, our lobotomized swamp donkey of a president unilaterally erased 5 centuries of geographic history. Regardless of what our McDonald's fart-filled blimp of a wannabe dictator says, the sane half of America, not the inbred cult of MAGA rockbiters, will always refer to that body of water correctly with respect to our southern ally. We created the Gulf of Mexico Mexican lager for those in America who still have the courage to stand up to bullies and respect a world order that's held together by a common belief in democratic ideals and the rule of law. Salud.
Salud.
Salud. So now I'm getting all this national news because I'm apparently this guy calling for the assassination of the president. I believe I doubled down again because I think it's hilarious and we were selling tons of t-shirts. So I doubled down. I think there's a number of times that MAGA trolls can tag the FBI or the Secret Service that they have to come and investigate. And I think that I hit that number of times. So in this very tap room, I was visited by the Secret Service and the FBI. They had visited the Madison tap room first. And I was like, I got them. They're never going to come all the way up to Managua. And they did. And they called me and left a message, and I didn't respond. But then I called this military guy who said, Kirk, you need a lawyer before they talk to you. Thank God. And then I called Fred. So Fred was there with me when the FBI and the Secret Service came. And in the time, and they asked me, and these guys were junior officers, you could tell. They didn't want to be here. They knew that this was completely ridiculous, but they had me to ask me a couple questions. One of them was, do you want to assassinate the president?
Yeah.
I was like, and Fred's like, Kirk, just don't answer that. And then the other one was like, do you know any groups, that are organizing to assassinate the president? I think I answered no to all of them, but thankfully Fred was there. But the reason we're drinking Mexican lager right now is that the hour between when they first showed up and when Fred got there, I was sitting by myself knowing that I was going to be visited, by a member of the FBI and the Secret Service. And for the first time in my life, I actually started getting scared because we've all read stories about people being detained and put in detention centers. And yes, those guys might be ICE. But in my mind, the Secret Service and the FBI are kind of the same. And so for the first time in my life, I actually got scared and I wrote something that also went viral that says, if you don't hear from me later in the night, I am not suicidal, and I have all my wits about me. And if you don't hear from this social media account again, there will be somebody, a representative of mine who makes himself known that will speak on my behalf. But it is because I've been detained by the federal government. First time in my life I had thought that, and I was like, this is probably what a lot of brown-skinned people in America have gone through. Way worse than me because they're manhandled and they're beaten up. But I felt it a little bit, I think, and that's why the Gulf of Mexico is beloved by a few Chicago places in the Mexican communities in Chicago, because it tells a story and it gives Donald Trump the bird. When I talk about abolish ICE, I'll talk about how we are combating that in the cities where the resistance is happening. Okay, next we're talking about the resistance. Okay, so so that's that sign right here. This was supposed to be Madam President, this beer, and instead we called it. I had to change the name in 24 hours, and it went from Madam President because we thought Kamala was going to win, and it went from Kamala being supported by the 4 African Americans who I think, got America to where it should have been, so we could have elected a female black president, which would have been Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks. Oh man, I've lost it. 2 beers in. The first girl to go to a segregated school in the South. Ruby Bridges. There we go. Thank you. And then Barack Obama, who is the first black president, of course. So that was going to happen, and it obviously didn't happen. I'm still not quite sure everything matches up on why that didn't happen, but in a day, we created the Resistance Pilsner, which is the Statue of Liberty, took the place of Kamala, and it's backed up by 4 presidents who I think saved America when we needed saving the most. And that was George Washington during the Revolutionary War, Abraham Lincoln in the Civil War, Teddy Roosevelt in the first Gilded Age, when all the rich guys owned everything and all the rest of us didn't own anything. We are now in the second Gilded Age, which is undeniable in America. And then 4th is when FDR led us through World War II. So the resistance is currently alive and well all throughout America. When Trump was elected, I met with some groups throughout Wisconsin who were equally terrified of what was going to happen. And we've all, the Turners in Milwaukee, which is their organization is right across from where the Milwaukee Bucks play. There was a Bernie Sanders guy who was an organizer who has organized this organization called the Fighting Oligarchy Coalition. The Fighting Oligarchy Coalition is trying to help immigrants right now. The Turners are trying to fight flock cameras, and they're doing that stuff. And what we've kind of emulated, or what we're doing, is we've turned into a independent media company because I hire a bunch of smart people to write to our huge mailing list of people who buy T-shirts and beer from us to make sure that the truth is being getting out there, because we have lost a lot of the truth in mainstream media at the moment. So that is our resistance efforts right now. That's our company's resistance efforts, and that's our flagship beer. Now, Abolish ICE is next. So you'll see a bunch of these plaques right here with people's names on them. We have a shandy with 4 people's faces on it. We did a Kickstarter last February. We raised $250,000 in a crowdfunding Kickstarter that created the Minocqua Marketplace. And then this is an e-commerce site on that has now about 130 progressive businesses that are all selling their stuff on this e-commerce site. And the goal is to become an Amazon for progressives, so that at some point, if we lose the ability to have free and fair elections in America, which I think all of you should be terrified about, because we're hearing there's a slow rolling coup attempt by Trump and Trump's regime to try to cancel our elections in November. If they don't get there by November, they're still building a secret service, a secret police called ICE that might be able to do what they can't do in these elections. They might be able to do that in 2028. It's very scary. And in every resistance piece of literature that talks about resisting authoritarianism, we hear that the only nonviolent way to topple a dictatorship, if you've lost the ability to have free and fair elections, is through boycotting and striking. It's clear. They've done the research. There's a Harvard Kennedy School professor named Erica Chenoweth who's measured every single revolution in world history that she could measure. And it's pretty clear that like 75% of them, if they're going to change and get democracy back, happen through nonviolence. And like 20% of them were successful through violence. And a lot of people die in the process. So the numbers say we shouldn't take up arms against our government. The numbers say we should strike and boycott because that brings government to its knees. So I say that because striking is something I can't figure out how to do, and you need a lot of people to get together. But boycotting seems like something I was like, I'm already doing this. I've already collected a bunch of progressive businesses because I've been boycotted, and I need to figure out other ways to make money because my beer can't get to people because I'm so crazy liberal. So I collected a bunch of companies. We are now partnered with Who Gives a Crap Toilet Paper, which is the biggest partnership we have. We're partnered with, the equivalent of SC Johnson's. Oh, by the way, Georgia Pacific is owned by the Koch brothers, who funds the Trump regime, and they make toilet paper. So we found a substitute for toilet paper that you need to buy every month. Nobody needs to go through life without toilet paper. It's not advised. Similarly, SC Johnson makes off, and we need off in the North Woods. SC Johnson donates a lot of money to Trump. We found the Dugan sisters in Chicago who make a really great a mosquito spray. And so slowly but surely, we are building a group of businesses who you can buy all your everyday needs from, that if we lose elections, you'll be able to know that your money is not supporting a fascist regime. Now, right now, I call it kind of a fuck Trump Etsy, because most of the businesses are kind of like, fuck Trump, but eventually we want to turn into an actual serious e-commerce site where you can substitute all of your goods. The reason you're drinking Abolish ICE is because not only are we collecting progressive companies, we are donating some of the profits of all we sell from those companies to resistance groups that are fighting on the front lines. So right now we've started donating $500 a month. It will grow the more we can sell to the Illinois Coalition to help refugees and immigrants. And there's 100 groups within that coalition, but they have one umbrella organization that these are the guys at Broadview that are standing arm in arm and trying to help immigrants and trying to get them out of detention centers. Similarly, there's another group called the Illinois or the Midwest Immigration Bond Fund. So every time they disappear an immigrant or an American citizen with brown skin, they need to be bailed out of jail. And when they can get bailed out of detention centers or jail, they can then escape. And so it's imperative that these guys get money, and we donate some of the proceeds of what we sell on the Monopoly Marketplace to those two groups, and they will grow as we grow. And we will get more donations as we grow. That's our way of kind of supporting the resistance movements that are happening in the upper Midwest, which is both the Twin Cities and Chicago. It's not really happening in Wisconsin yet, but the big hot spots are those two places. Okay, so now we're gonna move to some beers that talk about fascism. And normally I would talk about the Freedom Trail. Oh, we're not doing the shanty. Oh, you want? Well, you can give them a bonus if you want. That was the Abolish Ice.
Oh,
did you pour the shandy instead of the Abolish Ice? We can do that.
No, pour
I mean-
abolish ice, and now I'm gonna pour.
There you go. You get a bonus. You get a bonus. That's good because. So that is the one. That's the. They're kind of a very similar beer. That's why I chose one. One is a lemon shandy, and the other. This is a grapefruit goes. By the way, and a goes is a salinated beer because Goes Germany, their water had more salt in it, and so why wouldn't you have you melt ice with salt, so that's why this is called abolish ice, and it had to be a Goes in my mind, and a grapefruit Goes is great for the summer. It's like a margarita. That's as for a beer. Okay, so the next beer is a Kolsch called Freedom Trail. It's got Ingrid Bergman. It's like the Casablanca theme, and the reason Casablanca exists as a movie is because if you were behind enemy lines in World War II, you had to go to North Africa and get to Casablanca, and then go to Portugal to get back to the United States. So there was like this freedom trail for Americans to like get out of from behind enemy lines. In this speech today, I wanted to continue the story of when I was visited by the Secret Service. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't the end of it, because now with the state of Wisconsin is not so happy with me. And the state of Wisconsin has decided that I am a rogue brewery who needs to be corrected. And what happened in June was the Department of Revenue took about $25,000 worth of our beer because they said that we didn't pay taxes on the beer. They said that we were making the beer illegally and not able to import it from Illinois. All of these things are absolutely crazy. The real issue is, well, I will invite Fred up to talk about this for a second, because Fred's a lawyer, and now we're getting into the legal stuff. Thank you. Fred is now fighting to save my ass once again, and he will talk about, this is the confiscation, and this is the,
which one was confiscated?
This is the why it shouldn't be confiscated, and the next fascist thing they did to me is what we're gonna do about it, how we're gonna win.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Sounds good.
Fred, give a round of applause to Fred.
Thank you all. Well, ultimately, the real issue was that Kirk has been brewing beer in Illinois, which the state of Wisconsin does not really allow small breweries to do. Or, I mean, really big breweries either. You kind of have to brew in state or be an out-of-state exporter, which is sort of a pretty clear violation of the Commerce Clause in the American Constitution. So they've been doing this for a while, but it just apparently hasn't come up before.
What Supreme Court case to fix the Commerce Clause situation in the American Constitution?
Well, I mean, there's the Granholm case
Granholm rehealed.
you discussed. But the Granholm's actually an old case, so this should have come up before. It's a 2003 case. So I don't know why we're the first dealing with it, but their interpretation of the Wisconsin statutes is a pretty clear violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause. So we're fighting them in Dane County, and then there's an administrative hearing we've got to go through as well. But ultimately, I'm pretty certain that we'll come out on top of this one.
Can we get our beer back?
Well, we'll see. That I'm less.
Fred's not as confident that we can get our beer back.
That I'm less confident about, but I think ultimately we're gonna save your license, save all the really important stuff. I don't know if we're gonna necessarily save
Fred,
it here, but
how long is it going to take before they actually can take my license away, given due process?
probably a year.
Probably a year, he says. Thank God the wheels of justice move slowly. Anything else you want to add, my friend?
I don't know. You didn't tell me what I was talking about. You just said I was talking.
I think that, what other things do we have?
Well, we got the ICE lawsuit is pending.
Oh, talk about the ICE lawsuit. So some of you may have donated to my super PAC. I've now disposed of my super PAC because I'm wanting to support all of the Democrats who are running who don't get money from special interests. I started one 5 years ago in order to fight fire with fire, but I felt it was a little incongruous to have a super PAC and be fighting for Francesca Hong and for Abdul Sayed and for Peggy Flanagan, and none of their taking. So I took it away, but we raised money in the super PAC to hire Fred to unmask ICE. Give us one example of what was the complaint you wrote to unmask ICE.
I mean, the primary argument in that complaint is that it's a violation of your right to.
Violation of what right? What amendment?
Your First Amendment right to petition your government. They're hiding their identities, so you can't directly petition individuals. Sort of the main core of our argument. Currently, the Western District of Wisconsin is deciding whether or not Kirk has standing to bring that suit. So that's what we're waiting on is a motion to dismiss in the Western District. I think I filed the reply on that about 2 months ago, maybe. So it'll be another few months before we find out.
Thank you, Fred. Give Fred a round of applause. So, Fred is almost as much of a thorn in the side of judges as I'm a thorn in the side of Republicans. Because the federal judges don't want to hear from us because we're tiny little know-nothings, apparently. But he is a lawyer and he's part of the bar, and we can file any lawsuits we want to file. And we file the ones that are right. But weirdly, even in the Wisconsin justice system, just like in the Supreme Court, if you're not a lawyer that's on the appellate side and they don't see you a whole lot, sometimes they don't necessarily want you. They want to read your stuff. And it's a part of the justice system that if you're not a lawyer, you don't really see too much, but it's not good. Everybody should be able to file lawsuits equally. Judges should hear everybody's lawsuits fairly and equally. There should not be any preference for if you're a big-time lawyer in a big city versus a small-town lawyer. That shouldn't happen. And unfortunately, it does. Okay, let's talk about Antifa October Fist. So if you parked in our driveway, you'll see signs that say Antifa parking only. On those signs are your grandfathers or great-grandfathers that landed on the beaches of Normandy, because those were the original Antifa, which stands for anti-fascists, and they fought with the Allies to beat Hitler and beat back fascism so that democracy prevailed. So we made this beer 2 years ago before the presidential election, but it's even more prescient today than it was back then. Let me read the back. Oh, by the way, the back of the can has a picture of Captain America punching Hitler. And they sold that stamp in the 1940s as a way to raise money, as part of a bond, a way to raise money to fight the war. So let me read the back of this. It says, according to Captain America in the fort, is it okay to punch a Nazi? According to Captain America in the 40s, it was. During World War II, America rose up against Nazi Germany and rejected the idea of fascism, which is defined as government led by a strongman that fetishizes power, uses violence to quash opposition, demands absolute loyalty, and gains power by seducing those who perceive themselves as victims. Does that sound like anybody you know? Over the last 70 years, we've honored our American forefathers who vanquished fascism in Germany. Those heroes were anti-fascists, or for short, Antifa. Unfortunately, fascism has once again reared its ugly head, not in Germany, but here at home within America's borders. That's why we made Antifa October Fist, a German-style fest beer that is uniquely American. Of course, it's not okay to punch anyone, but it's patriotic as hell to raise your fist against fascism, reject its four tenets, and embrace the true American ideals of democracy, freedom, justice, and equality of opportunity. What's the word for cheers in Germany? Prost! I forgot it yesterday too. So let me digress for a second. What is happening in America is pure fascism. They just by a vote of 51 to 49 at 4:30 a.m. in the morning this morning, our U.S. Senate just confirmed Todd Blanche to be our Attorney General. Todd Blanche is instrumental in slow walking every last thing a judge has told the Department of Justice to do, including releasing the names of the people who are in the Epstein files. Donald Trump, he is Donald Trump's personal lawyer, which means we now have a guy who can direct the entire arm of the criminal justice system at the federal level against anybody who Donald Trump doesn't like, including the very same senators that helped confirm him, which is probably the reason some of those Republicans voted that way, because they knew that if they didn't confirm him, something was gonna happen to them. If you saw that senator from Louisiana, he looked scared as shit when he made that vote and explained the vote that he had to make. And by the way, never think that Susan Collins, a Republican from Maine, and Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, who said they wouldn't vote for Todd Blanche, never let them off the hook. They do this every single time when they know there's enough Republican votes to pass a bill. They vote no so they can convince the Democrats in their states that they're actually trying to stop things. They aren't. They're complicit. There is performative politics happening at the national level, and unfortunately, a lot of Democrats are part of these performative politics. Even our own senator, the only lesbian that's ever been elected in the history of politics at the United States Senate level is Tammy Baldwin. She voted to continue funding the government that gave $70 billion to ICE to create a secret service in America. She voted to open up government because there's a rotating cast of characters even within the Democratic Party. It's called the rotating villain theory. They decide that something has to happen, and they say, who has to take the fall this time? Who has to vote against or vote for it this time, and who doesn't get to vote for it and keep the Democrats happy? She voted to open up our government because she's part of this part. It's not a conspiracy theory, but it's rolling the theory of rolling over to play dead so that Americans will be so disgusted and so hurt by the economy that they'll vote for Democrats later. That's a terrible, terrible theory and strategy, because when the rank and file, when people who are suffering watch our leaders roll over and play dead, we lose hope. So it doesn't matter. And also we suffer. We suffer. We lose money, we lose healthcare, we lose Medicare, we lose. And so they're playing strategy so that they get bigger margins of victories later, but we lose hope in our leaders. And that's why there's a huge schism in the Democratic Party right now. Because there's another wing that's decided they're not going to roll over and play dead. And that wing has been winning over and over and over and over again. In Michigan, Abdul El Sayed just won. He was outspent $70 million to like 10. And he was endorsed by mainstream media, had nothing good to say about him. They had nothing good to say about Mamdani, who's making crazy waves, awesome waves in New York City. They have nothing good to say about him because they're all sponsored by this crazy wealthy group called AIPAC. And AIPAC, God bless them, a lot of them really care about Israel because that's their homeland. But the problem is Israel's committing genocide right now, and it's pretty hard for anybody that's paying attention to not realize that. And so AIPAC wants to kill any progressive Democrat that talks about a genocide happening against Palestine, and nobody believes it. And that's why these guys are getting elected, even though they're being outspent by the gazillionaires, who also are the ones who own the Tammy Baldwins, the Chuck Schumers of our own party, which I hate to have to admit that, but I believe it. I've been led to believe it today. So now let's go to the next beer, for crying out loud. I went on a tangent. This is called Fascist Tears. We've got eagle-eyed Kash Patel here. We've got Pete Hegseth, whose haircut looks suspiciously like the shit emoji. And we also have Carolyn Levitt on the side. You can't read it. You can read it on our thing here, but we've got some special tattoos for Pete Hegseth. Let me read you the back of this can. Our new summer session IPA is made with the fermented laments of some truly frustrated fascists. Eagle-eyed Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, gets so drunk that his staff needs to request breaching equipment to rescue him from behind locked doors. Pete Hegseth, who spent millions of your tax dollars renaming the Department of Defense the Department of War, gets regularly punked by his speechwriting staff. Instead of giving him Bible verses to read at Pentagon worship services, they plagiarize quotes from Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. Now listen to this one. This is the best joke I'm going to give you all day. Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt, while attempting to de-Pinocchio herself by getting a nose job, couldn't shake the curse. The cross around her neck now grows larger every time she lies to reporters. Our new IPA will only get better with age, as the impending implosion of American fascism will surely intensify the flavors that these organic tears add to the brew. Cheers, everyone. So beating fascism should be our number one goal. Electing progressives whose number one goal that is, as opposed to placating rich people, should be what we want to do as folks in the upper Midwest. Luckily, we've got a lot of great candidates who are those people. One is Francesca Hong, who you should all vote for on Tuesday if you're in Wisconsin. Two, we got an oligarch called J.B. Pritzker. Just like Teddy Roosevelt was an oligarch. Oh my God, that leads us right back into Muckraker. Thank God for the segue. J.B. Pritzker is a really rich dude who grew up in a really rich family. Somehow or another, he understands the plight of the working person. Similarly to Teddy Roosevelt, who 120 years ago grew up in another really rich family, and he unfortunately was picked on as a kid. He was kind of weak as a kid. He learned how to box. He lost his wife. He had to go to Montana. He worked with a bunch of cowboys who toughened him up. He learned to befriend folks in labor. And he was a guy who stood up to the oligarchy 100 years ago, just like J.B. Pritzker is standing up to the oligarchy in Illinois. You don't have to be a socialist to be somebody we want to back. You need to be somebody who's willing to stand up to Trump. So we got J.B. Pritzker, we got El Sayed, we got Peggy Flanagan, who's got her primary in Minnesota on Tuesday. We've got this guy named Sand in Iowa who might just win as governor because everybody hates fascism and rubber-stumping Trump stooges in different states. Iowa's bleed blood red, but they still might vote for this guy. And so the upper Midwest could really come out strong over the next couple weeks when all these primaries happen. And we need them to be strong because we need to make sure that we fight against fascism and the Trump regime. Now, one way to do that is through muckraking. And Teddy Roosevelt would have never been able to beat Rockefeller, Carnegie, Vanderbilt, and J.P. Morgan and bust up those monopolies to give working folks a chance to get through life okay, unless he had a bunch of writers that wrote about the plight of the working folks 120 years ago. And those writers or Ida Tarbell, who wrote for McClure's magazine, and she wrote on the coast. And then who I'm more familiar with is Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle, about Polish immigrants working at a meatpacking plant in Chicago. I read that book when I was a kid, and I think that helped turn me a little bit into the softy, lefty, bleeding heart liberal that I am today. So Polish immigrants moved to get a better life from Poland to Chicago. They worked at this company, this meatpacking plant. The meatpacking plant, because all they cared about was profits, owned all the housing for the immigrants. They made the housing terribly so that it was drafty, so that people got sick in the middle of winter because they were too cold. Secondly, they had the only grocery store, the company grocery store, that all these immigrants had to shop at. They put sawdust in the Spam, which was already Spam and not really meat. So they can make the most margin on their meat. It was not nutritious, and it was not healthy for these immigrants. And third, when they went to work, if they hurt themselves in an accident with large knives because it was a meatpacking plant, they had no social safety network. And if they got hurt, they weren't able to work, and their families starved. That's what the Upton Sinclair wrote about in The Jungle, and he made Americans just like you and me who read that book so sick to their stomachs of what their government was doing to these poor people that they supported Teddy Roosevelt. And they voted for senators and congressmen and state senators and assemblymen that had the same kind of idea that we can't treat people so shittily. The middle class is what America has always been, because people in jail in the UK came over here, or serfs or whatever, because they were getting, or Quakers, because they were getting religiously messed up in the UK. We have never been royalty in America. We have always been the middle class, and that's why we have thrived so much, is because the middle class needs to have laws to protect the middle class, and we've created that. Somehow or another, it's slipping away from us. And so the muckrakers of today, who are trying to convince and to edify all of us, the one that I respect the most, I think, is Heather Cox Richardson, who emails. I get an email from her almost every day. She never takes a break. She's a machine. But there's other ones that are smaller, called the Midas Touch Network. There's the Young Turks. There's this guy named Hassan Piker who's absolutely harmless, but they've kicked him out of the UK because he's so anti-APAC. But there's also Amanda Nelson, who's a friend of mine, and Amanda's Mild Takes. These are all happening. They're called influencers, and they're on Substack, which is an emerging platform for independent media. YouTube is an emerging platform for independent media. And I hear what most of you are thinking, because I thought the same thing. Why do we have to depend on YouTube and Substack to get our news? Why can't we get our news from 60 Minutes, CBS, NBC, ABC, The Post, the New York Times? Because they're all being bought by the oligarchy. The Washington Post was number 1 or number 2 in the newspapers of record in America. It was bought by Jeff Bezos. He has decimated the Washington Post. CBS was bought by Larry Ellison of Oracle. They're trying to combine that. They're trying to buy CNN. Barry Weiss was put in charge of CBS, and she fired all the good journalists at CBS. It's no longer to be trusted. It is now part of state-run media. Twitter was bought by Elon Musk. It is now a cesspool of craziness. Facebook, 3 months before the presidential election, I have 250,000 followers on Facebook. Everything we posted 3 months before the Kamala Trump election only was seen by about 500 people a day, and most of everything I post is seen by at least 100,000 people a day. It's obvious we were being shadow banned. So our media is being controlled by the oligarchs, and that's why we have to seek out the muckrakers who are in independent media. Now, believe it or not, The Minocqua Brewing Company also, I call myself a C- version of Heather Cox Richardson, because every time you buy a t-shirt from me or a beer from me online, I surreptitiously put your email into the Minocqua Brewing Company Times Substack page. We have 170,000 people who are who get my emails every single day, and those people don't get emails from me. They get emails from me on Sundays. They get emails from Patty Vasquez, who's a political talk show host at WCPT 820 in Chicago, on Mondays. They get emails from Ben Cominos, who's a progressive talk show host in Appleton, on Tuesdays. They get emails on Thursdays from Matt McNeil, who's a progressive talk show host for 950 AN Minneapolis on Thursdays. They get emails from Michael Yoakum, who is a drummer for Korn on Saturdays, who's one of the one of the best writers I've ever met, and he's a drummer for a heavy metal band. So I've hired people to write, to be an independent media voice for the Upper Midwest, and because I've got a huge email list, we consistently rank top 50 among U.S. political Substack sites in the country. But we focus on the Upper Midwest because there's a lot of smart people on either coast who are figuring out how to resist through writing for them. But there's not as many that focus on the Midwest. And so that's what we do. So that's why we're muckrakers. Tony, let's do the coffee. Okay, so I always like to end with something that's not booze, because in the Midwest we eat dinner dramatically early, like at 5:30, which is about a half hour from now. And so I don't want you to get in trouble when you go to the supper club and you have a steak. I don't want you to get pulled over for drunk driving, so I try to pick you up with a little caffeine. But by the way, you don't have to worry about being picked up for drunk driving, because the cops around here only care about one guy, and it's me. It's a basic country club if you're up here as a tourist. You'll never get pulled over for drunk driving, but you will get arrested for disorderly conduct if you talk about corruption on a stage in a beer garden at the Minocqua Brewing Company. But I always want to end up with some coffee. Today I'm going to do milkshake alarm clock, which is a nitrogen infused oat milk, blueberry flavored, vanilla flavored coffee. I make it with another muckraker. His name is Steve Hofstetter, who's a comedian, who's a red-haired Jewish comedian from New York, who we become friends, and so that's his. We make this for him, but we also make Woke, which is our other coffee. And what I want to leave you with is, we are obviously muckrakers at the Minocqua Brewing Company, but everybody has a vote and everybody can be an activist in their own communities. And if you're from a small town in Wisconsin, which usually bleeds red, it's imperative that you go back to your small town and you get involved. If we can do this in the reddest part of Wisconsin, you surely can run for your school board, or run for your town board, or run for your county board, which might be full of really corrupt contractors, because that's usually who they are, who want to get the bids from the government, to build stuff. They're corrupt. They don't care about anybody except for their own wallet. And those are the guys who run for these small positions. If you would run for these things, you would be able to make the America that you want happen at the local level, which is justice, fairness, equality. And if people start believing in that at the local level, then they'll vote for the people at the higher levels who will vote. We don't believe in that right now because we're not seeing it at the federal level, and we're barely seeing it at the state level. But it's super easy to organize a bunch of people who care about equality, fairness, transparency, and justice at the local level. And that's where it starts. And so I encourage you, if you've heard this and are drunk now, to have that fire in your eyes that will not be extinguished when you sober up, and you go and run for office and you get involved as an activist when you come home. Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate it. Boom.